Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming along tonight and sharing your evening with us, as Nick said, as part of our biggest ever People Geek Up. And it is very humbling to stand on stage and look out at all of you and think that you want to be part of this community and you want to come with people like us, but people like you, to talk about what it means to be culture first. And this is a topic that's very core to me, and it's very core to what Culture Amp is all about. And we're thrilled to be here with BT to talk about that topic for us, but also want to hear a little bit from Jamie about what it looks like in the real world when somebody has to grab this by the throat and actually make it happen. My journey, some of you may have seen me speak at some of the things we have done here in London. I hope I'm the person that's travelled the furthest distance to come tonight, all the way from Melbourne. And in a previous life, before I started Culture Amp, I used to work for Hollywood. So I used to come to London. I worked on Harry Potter 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8, doing computer-generated imagery. And I've worked on Lord of the Rings, Batman, Superman, all of these films. And I've now realised that no matter what we do at Culture Amp, people will think the fact that I worked on Harry Potter is a lot cooler. I was there for 13 years. I worked my way up as a software engineer all the way to CEO. And when I decided to step out and start a software company, I couldn't help reflecting on the fact that as a CEO, you're basically a glorified psychiatrist. And my job, I felt, was to build software that would help these glorified psychiatrists do a better job. And it's important, because I think what we're seeing now is that companies that are truly culture first are disrupting industries. They're running faster than anybody's ever run before. They're doing things that we haven't seen. The challenge is, building a culture first company is hard. At Culture Amp, what we want to do is make it really, really, really easy to collect, to understand, but most importantly, to act on employee feedback. And employee feedback sounds like such a simple thing, but it's actually at the heart. It's the fuel that you need if you actually want to build a culture first company. And doing that, we've had the fortune over the last 5 years to work now with over 1,100 companies globally, and to have built our own company into over 140 people in 4 offices, so Melbourne, San Francisco, New York, and London. And we started life working with a lot of fast growth small tech companies. We helped some of those companies grow. I mean, companies like Airbnb were 100 people when we started working with them. They're over 3,500 now. We've branched out of tech and into traditional industries, into businesses that were not known for being culture first, but are now grappling with not just growth, but with transformation. And there are companies that I'm not allowed to put the logos up on the screen of. Companies with 50,000, with 100,000 people that are embracing these things that even 10 years ago people thought were just the domain of fast growth tech companies. And this is happening because the actual way we're building businesses, and most importantly the way we're building value, is changing. You know, even as long ago as 1975, 83% or 80, I can't even read my own numbers, 85%, 83% of the value of the business was in tangible assets. It was in the building around you. It was in the printing press. It was in physical things you could see and touch. And what we're seeing now in organizations is all of that is up here. The assets that businesses are built upon are no longer physical, they're intangible. And the business itself, the way we work, has changed. 1938, Henry Ford said, "Why is it when all I want is a pair of hands, I get a brain attached?" And unfortunately, we still think of the world of the work in that way. We're not fully coming across to what it means to actually embrace and engage that brain that we need to create that value. Business leaders are waking up. So there was a survey last year run of CEOs globally, and they asked people, which is the most important strategy for you to get right next year? 30% chose people. More than business, more than operations, more than sales, more than innovation. That was the number one strategy that these CEOs had to get right. But the problem they have is that's not how we run our business. So what a lot of companies now realize, at least intellectually, is that to be financially successful, you have to put the customer first. You have to be truly customer-centric. But if you actually want to be truly customer-centric, you have to start by putting culture first. You have to build the culture that is going to deliver that customer centricity. But if we think about how we actually run our businesses, what we measure, what we look at, the reports that we get every day, they're overwhelmingly tracking the finances, tracking the cash, tracking the operating metrics. We're just starting to get used to thinking about marketing and doing that well. And if we've got any time left, we look at culture and the things that we can measure. So what does it look like when someone gets it right? What does it look like when somebody is truly culture first? Some CEOs would say that culture is just what culture is. We can't affect it. We don't need to change it. We just need to focus on making sure we get enough money for shareholders. That's what we're employed for. Other CEOs would say it's important that you have something that the market wants. But if you can't create an environment where people want to provide what the market wants, you're dead too. And what culture-first organisations do is they individually and very uniquely curate an experience for their people that is specific to the market, to the world that they want to live in. And they think in every decision that they're going to make, what is the impact of this decision on my culture? How do these two work together or against each other? See, striving to build a culture-first company is not an alternative to financial success. I'm not saying you can choose to be financially successful or you can choose to be culturally successful. What I'm saying is that culture first is the way to be successful. It's the means to the end. And the real power of culture is actually not just in the pursuit of success. You know, there's some great companies, the companies I showed you earlier, like Slack and Airbnb, that are building these amazing businesses, and they're incredibly successful. But the real test of culture is when things don't go to plan. Why invest in your people? Because when things don't work, they'll invest in you. And one of the really powerful ways of telling if somebody's actually built a true culture-first organisation is the resilience to the things that we see in the world around us. When things shift around so quickly and we ask ourselves, how are we even going to respond to this? That's what a truly culture-first company does. So how do you actually put culture first? What does it look like if you do it? You start with values. Now, when you talk about values in a company, I sometimes play values bingo, and I'll throw out a word like integrity and ask how many people have it, or excellence, teamwork, respect. We all end up with the same values, and they're what we would like to be on a good day. Good values are what you're willing to hurt for every day. So this picture here is a corruption of the Shakespeare. Bleed with me, and I'll forever be your brother. At Culture Amp, and it's about what are you willing to hurt for as an individual, but what are you willing to hurt for with other people? What are they willing to hurt for too? What is so important to you that this is why you come work at this place? So the values that we have at Culture Amp, the first one is have the courage to be vulnerable. Who's seen Brené Brown's Dare Greatly, the TEDx talk? If you haven't, you have to see it. It is phenomenal. Because we've got this idea of vulnerability as being a sign of weakness, and it's not. It's a sign of true strength. And it's also where trust comes from. So when you think about what's important in building a really strong culture, trust is right at the top. The way you build trust is through true vulnerability. As you can tell from our product, we believe in feedback. We believe in the power of iterative process and development. We trust people to make decisions, and we amplify others. Good values are the skills and behaviours that you value above all else. At Culture Amp, we care about your ability to amplify the people around you more than other things. And that leads to decisions like the fact that we somewhat heretically don't pay commission to any of our salespeople. And surprisingly, it works. People thought their heads would explode or something, but it works. And it works because as a culture, that's what we care about. And we have to remember, this is my son and my puppy, by the way, so that's Casper and Zubin. We have to remember that when we're thinking about crafting a workplace, when we think about building a culture, we borrow our time at work from people that are so much more important than the work is. And so if we're going to be here, we're going to be working together, it better be meaningful. It better be something that actually uses the best parts of me and engages me, because otherwise I could be with someone much more important. And as a person who started a company with 4 white, 30-something IT male brunettes, as you grow, you need to start paying down your diversity debt. And we use that term as this idea that every time we hire somebody, we have an opportunity to increase the diversity of our company. And it's obviously not just gender, it's education, it's what languages you speak, it's where you come from. I sort of joked internally at Culture Amp that we weren't truly diverse if we didn't have somebody that voted for Trump in our American office. It's forcing yourself to get a little bit uncomfortable. And the way we think about diversity and the idea that we can pay it down or we can increase it with every choice we make is a learning model. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this learning model, but this idea that we start with unconscious incompetence, we become consciously incompetent, and then if we work really hard, we become consciously competent and finally unconsciously competent. And so one of the hard things for a CEO or for an executive is to accept that, and that to realize I'm going to have to go from the bit where I didn't even realize I was bad to accepting I'm bad, hopefully working really, really hard and getting to the point where you're not that bad anymore. And on this particular topic, what we all strive for is that decades from now, this is not even something we need to talk about because it's just something that works everywhere. And if you really want to solve the diversity problem, you actually have to solve the inclusion problem. So this is Maya Angelou. It's a beautiful quote. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And it's that question. How do you make people feel when they join your company? Like in Silicon Valley, they have a huge problem. We have a huge problem in hiring female engineers. The problem is not that they can't get female engineers to join. The problem is that they can't keep them. What are you doing to create a place that somebody wants to belong? How do you put yourself in the shoes who is the first person of whatever minority it is or whatever background it is? How do you make it a place where they want to come? And then, somewhat uniquely, as a CEO, once again, the white CEO, I have to recognize that when I'm up on this stage, hopefully I'm here because I'm good, but I'm also here because I've had the benefit of decades of compound privilege. And that's a very humbling and sobering thought, to realize that part of my job is to try and unwind some of that, but a big part of it is to call it what it is. So I was talking to a journalist about this topic, and she was an anthropologist, and she said something to me which has really stuck, which she said, the hallmark of privilege is that you can't see it when you have it. And so one of the things for people like myself is to actually recognize that it is privilege and that it's our job to try and unwind it. And if you can do that, hopefully you can start to deliver on a dream. I like to say that a brand is a promise to a customer, and culture is how you deliver that promise. And a culture-first company is one that is committed to creating an amazing business in the market, but by doing it, by anchoring it on an amazing culture. And with you all here today, what we want to do at Culture Amp is we want to help you, but we also want you to help us build something culture first. And when you're doing it, someone will tell you you're wasting your time. Someone will tell you it can't be done. Someone should tell you that's not the way you build really big, really great businesses. And I always go back to this George Bernard Shaw quote. People who say it cannot be done should not interrupt those that are doing it. Thank you.